Hello everyone and welcome to another Star Wars figure review. As we continue our look at the Saga Legends line today, we're going to take a look at a character from Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Now, as I mentioned in my last review, each of these figures are from an individual movie from the original trilogy. So in my last review I gave you a look at Luke Skywalker from Episode 4, A New Hope. In this review we're going to take a look at a character from The Empire Strikes Back, and coming up next we're going to take a look at a character from Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. So we're completing the trilogy in many ways with these next few reviews. With that said, let me introduce you to the figure that we're going to take a look at in this video, and it is of course none other than the scruffy looking nerf herder himself, Han Solo. Now I've got to say, out of the 3 Saga Legends figures that I'm reviewing for you from this wave, this has got to be my favourite, and that's mainly because he feels the most nostalgic. He truly does feel like a nod to the original Kenner figure from 1983, and I don't know, there's just something about it that just looks and feels awesome. By no means is he the vintage collection release from a few years ago, but obviously 5 years have passed since that figure was released. God, does time fly. So you know, you're going to have a hard time picking that one up, and if you are collecting for the first time and you want to add all the core characters to your collection, this isn't a bad way to go, especially for the price. As you all know, the Saga Legends are marked down to a much more acceptable, in my opinion, $5.99, which again could be argued that $5.99 should get you a whole lot more, but again, in today's collecting climate, it's pretty difficult to ask for much more, especially from a company such as Hasbro, but that's a story for another time. So before we get onto the review of this particular figure, let's take a look at the packaging that he comes in. And once again we get the standard Saga Legends 2015 design to this card. As you can see, you've got the standard Star Wars logo at the top, accompanied by the Disney logo in the corner. And we've also got the Star Wars Rebels Stormtrooper graphic acting as the main card back design. Just below that, we have an image of Han Solo himself, as well as a caption indicating which film this character is from. And on the back we have a still image of the figure from the movie itself. And just below that we have another couple of images showing which other figures are available in this wave. As I mentioned, I gave you a look at Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing pilot gear in my last review. And coming up next we'll be taking a look at Lando Calrissian in Skiff Guard disguise. Now, this particular wave does feature a few revisions from previous waves, such as the Inquisitor, Ezra Bridger and the Stormtrooper from Star Wars Rebels, and at the moment those are all currently in stock at staractionfigures.co.uk. So, if you want to purchase this figure or the rest of the wave, be sure to hit up the link in the video description, as that will take you to Star Action Figures, and they have all these figures at a great price. So if you want to add them to your collections, do so via the link. There are a ton of really cool Star Wars collectibles in stock over there at the moment. Some really cool Black Series stuff, some Rebels, you know, really cool stuff that you can pick up at awesome prices. So definitely recommend checking them out. So let's take a look at this figure. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the review, I really do like this guy. As I mentioned, it is kind of difficult to see past 5 points of articulation and in some respects subpar sculpts, but I don't know, there's just something about this figure that really does feel vintage and retro, and for that reason I really like it. Now, I understand that in 2015 we shouldn't really be expecting or desiring figures that you know, are throwbacks to the subpar standards, it would seem, of the 1980s, but you know, I don't know, there's just something about this figure that really does strike me. I think for many collectors, if these Saga Legends figures were styled in the original style of the vintage figures, then, you know, for example, similar to how Funko are currently doing the reaction figures, then I think they'd be a little bit easier to digest. But I think because they're modern sculpts with just subpar articulation, it's really hard to see past some of them as just budget figures, essentially. So it really depends on your outlook on this line as to whether or not you want to add this or any other Saga Legends character to your collection. But again, for me personally, maybe it's because I didn't grow up with the vintage figures. For me personally, I just have this really, I don't know, overwhelming desire to collect figures that remind me of the figures from the 80s. But I don't know, that's just me and my personal opinion, and I'm sure that many of your guys' opinions will differ. But with regards to this figure, as I said, he's not too bad. So let's run through some of the main features that he has. We'll knock articulation out of the park first, as that's obviously one of the talking points of the Saga Legends line. Obviously, as a budget figure, this guy does only feature 5 points. So we've got a swivel at the neck, and we've also got swivels at the shoulders and hips. So most importantly, he can be seated behind the controls of the Millennium Falcon. Now, one thing I really like about this particular figure are the colours that are used. They're really vibrant and they stand out really, really well, especially when you look at the jacket, which is a very vibrant blue, sort of bluey purple colour, and it really clashes well with the colour of the trousers. You know, it just makes the whole figure just stand out, and it makes it very, very colourful. Again, very vintage, very retro, and it gives it a really cool feel. The sculpt itself, though, isn't actually too bad. One thing that I really like about this guy, and again it throws back to the original Kenner days, is the fact that Han seems to have a slightly enlarged head. Now, that's not by any means to say that it looks bad, it's just that some of the previous vintage figures from the 70s and 80s, you know, they're infamous for Han Solo's head being slightly large, and in many ways this is a nice throwback to that. The facial sculpt itself isn't the best Harrison Ford likeness that we've ever seen, but it's certainly acceptable, and it looks like him enough to say, yeah, that's Han Solo. Again, it's not the best, but it's certainly not the worst. The rest of the figure is sculpted really well. You've got all the pockets and creases on the jacket. You've got the utility belt with all the various utensils attached to that. You've got a working holster sculpted on the side of the leg, which obviously can house the included blaster pistol. Now, one thing to point out about the blaster is the fact that while it's a new sculpt and it's decently detailed, it's very, very flimsy and very prone to damage. As you can see, the barrel is made of a very thin and again very flimsy plastic, and if you stick it into the holster with any force, no pun intended, you will probably damage the barrel, so do be careful when doing so. With regards to the rest of the figure from the waist down, we've got the really nicely designed and detailed belt, got the dashes down the side of his trousers, and all the creases in the boots. So all in all, a decent sculpt, and again, I don't know, there's just something about this one that screams vintage. I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's that enlarged head, maybe it's the vibrant colours, I don't know, but there's just something that looks cool about this figure, and I think if you accept it for what it is, which again is a budget 5-point of articulation, essentially a glorified nostalgic throwback, then I think you can enjoy these figures. But again, I do respect the opinions of those that can't stand them when compared to previous figures such as the vintage collection version, which was a really good figure in its own right. So there's not really much more I can say about this figure. Again, not great, but not bad. And I personally do really, really like this one. So I'm sure many people will agree with me, but again, that's what the comment section is for on this video. Feel free to share your thoughts on this guy. I really want to know what you think of him. And again, I'll be back to give you a look at Lando Calrissian in my next review, as I'm sure the debate will continue. So, with that said, I hope you've enjoyed this review. Again, I'm going to leave it up to you guys as to whether or not you want to make the purchase with this guy. All I can hope for is that you enjoyed this review. So, until my next one, as always, I want to thank you for watching, keep collecting, and may the force be with you.